Imagine you look in the mirror, but your reflection is delayed for a moment. Denzel Washington noticed one night someone was watching him, but that someone was familiar to him. But imagine, what if all the roles you've played came together and wanted to live your life? This is not the plot of a movie. This is the story of a man who lost his role. Los Angeles nights are not always silent, but tonight the silence was not just silence. There was a strange heaviness, as if the city had stopped breathing. Denzel Washington, standing in front of the window, understood this strange feeling exactly. All the lights in his house in the Hollywood Hills were off. Only the orange light of the city from afar turned the room into a sea of half-dark shadows. He was afraid to look in the mirror. Lately, turning his face away from mirrors had become a habit for him. And there was a reason for this. In that incident that happened a week ago, while reading the script for his new film, it was in the genre of psychological thriller. The main character, faced with his past roles, loses his identity. Although Denzel accepted the mastery of the script, one sentence touched his soul. A person is most afraid of looking at himself. He had not been able to sleep that night, and now in this strange and deep silence, he heard an unexpected sound. Footsteps coming from inside the house. However, he was completely alone. The security system was working. The doors were tightly closed, but the sounds coming from the stairs were mournful, carefully measured, and at the same time disturbingly familiar. Denzel gathered his thoughts and whispered, "This can't be." The footsteps sounded like his own, but in a different way. He was a good actor. He had appeared in horror films many times. But this time it was different. This wasn't about getting into a role. There was no camera. There was no scriptwriter. No one was saying, "Cut," and ending the scene. There was a mirror in the corner. It had a large, old frame. He had bought it by chance years ago in an antique shop, and the seller had said with a laugh, "These mirrors change hands often. No one can keep them for long." Denzel had laughed at that then, but he didn't laugh at it now. An unexpected movement occurred in the mirror. Denzel froze in place. He could see himself in the mirror, but something was different. The eyes seemed deeper, and the gaze was strangely delayed. It was as if the mirror hadn't shown its reflection in time. Denzel suddenly said, "Don't look at me." The other didn't listen and just smiled, although Denzel didn't feel any smile on his face. At that moment, a strange voice spread through the house. It was his voice. Clear, calm, but heartbreakingly scary. "You have mastered my role for a long time. This time the stage is mine." Suddenly, all the lights went on. Denzel immediately turned around. He didn't see anyone. He turned to the mirror, and his heart began to pound. He didn't see his reflection. The mirror was empty. The next day, he called his manager and asked him to stop all filming. He didn't tell anyone the reason. The media wrote that he was simply tired, but Denzel knew the truth. It wasn't tiredness. It was the feeling of being watched. Wherever he went, people looked at him with strange eyes. They seemed to recognize him, but at the same time they hesitated. A fan approached him and said, "Mr. Washington, I saw you here yesterday, but for some reason you weren't interested in me." "I wasn't here yesterday," Denzel replied quietly. Fan was silent for a moment, then asked in a hoarse, dry voice, "Who was that then?" When he returned home that night, he found an envelope in the mailbox. There was no address on it. Inside was only a photo. The photo had been taken in his house, but something strange caught his attention. The photo showed Denzel sleeping, and in the background was a mirror, and in that mirror someone was looking at him. That was enough to make him realize that running was pointless. They had found him. Who he was, his past, every line of his face, the pieces of his entire life had become a knot. Another soul had been trapped in the roles he had played for years, and now it was demanding its release. Denzel stood in front of the mirror again. "Who are you?" he asked. This time the answer came immediately. "I am you, but from the side you don't see, the part you hide behind the camera." Suddenly the mirror cracked. What made the feeling even more terrifying was a sight he had never imagined. A hand reached out from the cracks. Time seemed to freeze as the hand slowly emerged from the mirror. Denzel wanted to scream, but his throat felt tight, unable to make a sound. Every detail of the hand, the color of its skin, the veins, the shape of its fingers, was his hand. But this hand was as cold as death. As the cracks grew, the mirror trembled. He could feel a breath being taken from inside. "You've been doing this for years," a deep voice came from the mirror. "What?" Denzel asked in fear. "You've become someone else. But now it's my turn." He grabbed her wrist. Suddenly, a flood of images began to flood his mind. Movie scenes, but there were no cameras, no set. A man in a dark room, crying, training day, a single body, writhing in blood, man on fire, a silhouette running down narrow dark hallways. But this time, it wasn't the image of the actor running away. This time, it was Denzel who was running. He stepped back. The mirror's shiny surface suddenly turned into a black, endless void. It was no longer flat glass. A well was hidden deep within. Whispers slowly began to rise from that surface. Thousands of voices, and each one was its own. "You played our lives. Now we're playing you." The mirror cracked with a loud sound. He opened his eyes, startled. It was already morning. Denzel found himself lying on the couch. Everything in the house was normal. Peace breathed. Things were in their places. He looked in the mirror. It was hanging on the wall. He was healthy, not a single flaw. "It must have been a dream," he whispered to himself. But the red fingerprints he saw on his wrist caused a sense of unease. He picked up his phone. Dozens of unanswered calls greeted him. Calls from his manager, his producer, and numbers he didn't recognize. Suddenly, he saw a message that caught his attention with an alert tone. "We watched you on TV last night. You were live." Denzel walked in. He turned on the TV. The news channel was showing a rerun. He was on the screen. But it was impossible. Denzel had never been in this studio before. The host's question kept repeating, "Mr. Washington, you're saying you want to end your acting career. Why?" Denzel on the screen was looking at the camera. There was no emotion in his eyes. He was smiling, but it was a strange expression, frighteningly perfect. At that moment, a sentence escaped his lips. "Because I'm not you anymore." The broadcast suddenly stopped. Denzel turned off the TV in amazement. His breathing was rapid, and only one thought was running through his mind. This was really something that could not be understood. Everything from his voice to his facial expressions was so perfect. Perhaps too perfect. There was a knock on the door, breaking the silence. He approached the door step by step, then slowly unlocked it. When he opened the door, what he saw completely shocked him. He was standing in front of him. The exact same clothes, the same facial features. But there was one difference. The look in his eyes was calmer. But that calm seemed frighteningly cold. "You didn't invite me in," the guest said softly. "This is my house," Denzel protested, trembling with difficulty. "Not anymore."
Denzel, who was in front of him, quietly stepped through the doorway. He turned his head and looked at the walls, at the pictures and awards. "These don't belong to you," he said without haste. "These are just the shadows of the roles you've played. And I've replaced you with roles, because I'm the product of those roles." "So what do you want?" Denzel asked, feeling the difficulty of the words coming out of his mouth. The other smiled, again with that creepy smile. "The stages are no longer yours. The lights will be mine. The audience, too. And you will disappear behind the curtain." Suddenly, everything was covered in darkness. Not even a breath could be heard in the room. In the darkness, a familiar and deep sound filled the space from afar. Camera, followed by another sound, motor, and finally the third, as if suffocating, let out a sigh. Start. The lights came back on, but then he saw that his own house was gone. Denzel was standing inside a boundless movie set. There were no walls or ceilings. It was pitch black, and hundreds of cameras were focused on him. He was the center of the moment. The other Denzel was watching silently, sitting in the director's chair. "This is your last scene," the director said. "Just be yourself." Denzel shouted back, I am myself now, the director smiled. The thing is, you have never been yourself. The cameras came closer to him. The lights blinded him. He wanted to retreat, but he felt his feet sticking to the ground. Suddenly, the sounds of the crowd began to be heard. The applause of the audience was rising. "Stop!" Denzel shouted, but the sounds grew louder. He experienced this moment to the depths. His facial muscles were tensing and hardening. He did not want to smile, but his lips moved. His eyes were watering. But everything looked perfect in front of the camera. "Cut!" the other Denzel shouted. Darkness rose again. The next day, the world media was shaken by a new headline. Legendary actor Denzel Washington unexpectedly returned to the stage. He amazed the audience with his new image and tough features. A live interview was being broadcast on television screens. Denzel on the screen was calm, his breathing was regular, and his eyes were dull. The presenter asked, "How are you feeling?" He replied, "Finally, I am free." The camera carefully approached his face. In the depths of his gaze, far away, it was felt that something needed help. But he was silent.